I realized my dad had never reserved a room for me the moment the hotel receptionist glanced at the list, and then at me. "Sir, there are only 3 rooms booked under your name." 3? My parents, my sister, her husband. No 4th key. I stood there, suitcase in hand, watching my family move ahead like I was luggage they forgot to claim. The marble floor reflected their silhouettes, complete, comfortable, while I stood just outside the frame. My sister didn't even lower her voice. "A failure doesn't deserve to go anywhere with this family." A few guests turned. My dad said nothing, not even a glance. The silence wasn't accidental. It was agreement. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just clarity. I nodded slowly as if everything made sense now. "Then I'll just leave." I turned before anyone could stop me, though no one did. But as I stepped out of those glass doors, dragging my suitcase into the night, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. For the first time in years, I was taking something back. I had learned early in life that in my family, love was not something given equally. It was something earned. And somehow I always stayed one step behind the score. My father was a man who respected achievement more than effort. He didn't shout or insult. He simply excluded. If you weren't impressive, you slowly became invisible in his decisions. Over time, I stopped expecting him to notice me at all. My sister, on the other hand, never needed silence. She filled every room with certainty. Perfect grades, perfect opinions, perfect confidence in being right. I was her favorite comparison point, always the example of what not to become. Even as a child, I noticed the pattern. Photos where I stood slightly out of frame, conversations that shifted direction when I spoke, plans made without asking if I was included. So I adapted. I became quiet, observant, careful with my presence. I told myself it was peace, but it was really preparation for being left out again. That trip wasn't an accident. It was just the first time they stopped pretending I mattered at all. It didn't start with the hotel. It started long before we even packed. At home, I watched my father place the travel documents on the table. He went through names slowly. My mother, my sister, her husband, like reading a list that was already finalized. When he reached me, his hand paused for half a second, then moved on as if the page itself didn't include me. No one corrected it. The next morning, I helped carry the luggage downstairs. My sister checked her phone without looking up. "Try not to slow us down," she said casually, as if I was part of the baggage policy. Even in the car, I sat in the back corner while conversations flowed over me like I wasn't physically there. When I spoke once, to point out a road sign, my comment dissolved mid-air. No response. Just a slight shift in my father's eyes toward the mirror, then away again. At the hotel desk, I already knew something was wrong before the receptionist spoke. My father's voice was calm when he said 3 rooms. Too calm. Practiced. My sister didn't hesitate. She smiled faintly like it was obvious. That smile stayed with me longer than her words. I didn't argue when I stepped out of the hotel. I didn't look back either, but once I reached the quiet edge of the parking lot, I finally opened my phone, not out of hope, but habit. The screen lit up with travel confirmations, bookings I had made weeks ago after noticing the pattern too many times to ignore. One reservation stood out, a single executive room under my name. I thought it was a mistake. Then I remembered. I had booked it myself quietly months ago, after the last family trip ended the same way. Me standing outside decisions I was never part of. I had told myself it was backup planning. Now it felt like foresight. The hotel confirmation included early check-in and a separate wing, far from the group bookings my father preferred. A detail I once ignored now felt like a door opening. The moment it shifted. Not anger. Not revenge. Just clarity. If they had already written me out of their version of the trip, then I didn't need to stay in it at all. I turned back toward the entrance. Not to rejoin them, but to pass them as someone they no longer controlled. I didn't rush back into the lobby. Instead, I stood where the noise thinned out and started reviewing everything calmly, like I was checking a case file rather than a family trip. Over the past few months, I had quietly rebuilt parts of my life they never paid attention to. I had started managing my own finances, separating expenses, and booking things independently. Small decisions at first, then full control over my travel and accounts. Not out of rebellion, but observation. I noticed how often I was left out, and I stopped leaving inclusion in their hands. I pulled up confirmations, timestamps, payment records. Everything was clean, in my name, under my control. Even my work credentials, projects, freelance contracts, client references, were organized in a way that didn't depend on anyone in my family network. I had learned how quickly people rewrite your place in their story if you don't anchor it yourself. There was no need for confrontation. Confrontation gave them control over tone, over emotion, over outcome, so I chose structure instead. I sent a single message to the family group chat. I've checked in separately. You don't need to wait for me. No explanation, no emotion, just placement of fact. Then I turned my phone face down and walked back toward the hotel, on my terms, not theirs. I walked through the hotel entrance just as my family was, still standing near the reception desk, mid-conversation with the staff. My father was speaking in that controlled tone he used when something didn't go according to plan. My sister stood beside him, arms folded, waiting for the situation to bend itself back into order. It didn't. The receptionist looked up again, this time with confirmation in her hand. Yes, sir, there is a separate reservation already checked in under his name. The word already landed differently. For the first time, I saw confusion replace certainty on my father's face. Not anger, confusion. Because the system he relied on no longer matched the reality in front of him. My sister turned slightly, her eyes narrowing as she realized I wasn't standing where she expected me to be. I didn't announce myself. I simply passed behind them, collected my room key from the counter, and gave a small nod to the staff. No one stopped me. The silence followed me again, but this time it felt different. Not exclusion, recognition. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection in the metal doors, calm, composed, no longer waiting to be included in decisions already made without me. And for once, they were the ones adjusting. The moment I disappeared into the elevator, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted in a way no one spoke about directly, but everyone felt. My father stayed at the desk a few seconds longer than necessary, staring at the reservation screen as if it might rewrite itself. It didn't. For the first time, I saw him reach for control and find nothing solid to hold. My sister tried to laugh it off at first. Small, dismissive comments about mix-ups and complications. But her voice didn't carry the same certainty anymore. It cracked slightly at the edges, like a script she was no longer fully convinced by. What unsettled them most wasn't my absence. It was my independence. No argument, no begging, no visible need for approval, just absence with structure behind it. Even the staff began treating the situation differently. Less confusion, more confirmation. Systems don't take sides. They just respond to facts. And the facts no longer required my family's permission for my place. Outside their circle, I didn't collapse. I functioned. That's what made it uncomfortable for them, and meaningful for me. Because the real question wasn't whether I left. It was whether I had ever actually needed to stay in a place where my value had to be. Argued for it all. That night, I didn't feel victory the way people expected in stories. There was no rush of satisfaction, no dramatic relief, just a quiet settling. Like a weight I had been carrying finally stopped pretending to be part of me. In my room, I placed my suitcase by the wall and sat near the window. Outside, the hotel lights softened everything into calm shapes and distant movement. For the first time, I wasn't scanning for approval in anyone else's expression. There was nothing to decode, nothing to earn. I thought about my family, not with anger, but with distance. Some relationships don't end loudly. They end in small confirmations repeated, over time until silence becomes the final answer. I had mistaken that silence for something I needed to fix. Now I understood it was something I had already outgrown. The future didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like direction. Work I had postponed, places I had avoided going alone, decisions I had always waited to be included in, no longer needed permission for any of it. If they remembered me, it would be as someone who stopped asking to be seen and started building a life that didn't require it. And for the first time, that felt like enough.